And my next question is perhaps maybe a little bit more specific. So I was just wondering if you could share maybe what are some of the different support programs offered by Singapore to actually help digital startups like yourself in the course of you going on this startup journey and operating your business. Were there any specific support that you have received from the Singapore government? Yeah. Maybe Serene, would you like to go first this time, and then Patty and Kun?
Yeah. So before I was in healthcare, I was in fintech for a tiny bit. And so, I know that there was the MAS Sandbox, and then that inspired the MOH Sandbox initiative, under the LEAP program. And I think that the Sandbox was, you're asking about like support programs, but the Sandbox initiative was one of the most helpful things for us. So for those who are watching who don't really know what the MOH Sandbox was, technically it was, how regulations can really apply because the act is not done yet. So we were regulated on a contract basis. So we signed a contract with MOH, agreeing to abide by this regulation and that regulation. And we were allowed to sit in a room with MOH and come up with what we thought was appropriate legislation for our kind of business. And I think that this is something that Singaporeans or businesses based in Singapore often take for granted, that the people who are most affected by regulations are put in the same room as regulators, and both of them talk about, what would be best, the best legislation and the best regulation, and how do we put patient safety first. Because it's not just a one-way street, in a lot of countries and in the region, there's a lot of, okay, we do this and we do that. And that's why you see like, a large culture of lobbying in countries like America. But in Singapore, I think that the conversations that we've had with MOH and also, through the COVID period, MOM and MPA and all those, I think that they've been very open communication, and that's the biggest support that we could have gotten from the whole of government, apart from like support programs of initiatives and monetary grants and stuff like that. So the open communication is something that we really, really appreciated.
Sorry, is it my turn? Okay. No, so for a lot of the programs that the Singapore government has for startups is very, very supportive to Singapore-based company. Now, for companies like us, we are headquartered in Germany. And I'm very, really, really happy to see how the Singapore government is actually very well connected to other countries around the world. So they're not just focusing on, building up startups within Singapore, but also enabling startups that are based in outside of Singapore to come in and to really, build their knowledge and to really benefit the patients and the ecosystems in Singapore and beyond. So for example, and there's a lot of accelerator programs that Singapore is connected to, and that is really, really helpful for startups. So for example, like we are involved in the German accelerator, and the amount of connection and network and, that the accelerator can actually bring us startups like us in front of all the programs that the Singapore government has put in place to nurture and foster the startup environment is immense. So I really encourage startups to look into accelerators that the Singapore governments are connected with to see how they can tap into this immense ecosystem that would allow them to really expand, their business into this part of the region. And there's just a lot of programs that the government has put forth to support startups, and it's something that it's all over you, but you need somebody to actually connect you to all these right organizations and people, because there's just like a lot going on. Yeah. So that's one thing that I really find very useful for us.
Yeah. I guess I'll also add to what Patty said about accelerators. So I started the company about 3 years ago, and I think back in 2017, there were already programs such as Startup SG Founder and Startup SG Equity, which were really helpful to meet people in the ecosystem. Also, I think we're accepted in the SMU accelerator as well. But we were quite selective about which accelerators we were going to join. But definitely the ecosystem is there and is very supportive to founders. Also, like, running the business day to day, this year we found that the COVID job support scheme, the wage credit, the enhanced work-life grant. So, these are all very, very helpful in extending the runway for a startup as well, and much appreciated. And then also my staff as well, they participate in the IBF training scheme, which basically sponsors a lot of the upskilling and accreditation as well. I think they sponsor up to 95% of all the tuition. So, my staff have really taken advantage of that and have done courses like, the Scrum Master courses and whatnot. So I think all these things are really just fantastic and really nurturing to startups, not only, to founders, but also, to employees as well.
I actually echo everyone in this panel as well. I think Singapore is an amazing place when it comes to innovation and also just getting things off the ground because of the right infrastructure. I think it's definitely second to none in the region. But perhaps I'll hone in a little bit more on the industry that we're in, the mental health care space. So I believe there are tremendous growth opportunities. I'll start with Singapore first, because firstly, I think the government in Singapore has already set a pretty strong foundation by investing into nationwide campaigns like Beyond the Label, etc., to really raise awareness and mental health literacy over the past few years. So this was already done pre-pandemic times. And I think because of how this foundation was set up, they are able to move much quicker from awareness phase into the next phase of taking action. So for example, I mean, in quick response to the COVID-19 pandemic and also the long-term impacts on society, PM Lee actually came out and announced the formation of a COVID-19 mental wellness task force this month. And this is, convened by the MOH and also the IMH, along with many other government agencies. And this is truly a nationwide response to the mental health needs of Singaporeans. I think that kind of coordination is something that is quite hard to do, but Singapore is, world-class. They know how to do this very well, and execution is always key, and they can always do that. The government also allocated, 2 million in funds to actually help the Southeast District to raise mental health awareness. And so apart from nationwide kind of efforts, there are also more targeted approaches. So I think there's tremendous, room for growth, especially in Singapore. But kind of taking a step back and looking at it globally as well. I mean, funding has been at an all-time high for the mental health space. Just through third quarter itself for 2020, about 1.37 billion has been invested into mental health. This is way more than what was invested into the 1 billion that was invested into mental health for the entire year of last year. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for growth, be it in Singapore, regionally, and also globally. And I think this ties in very well to the fact that, what's happening with the whole digital health front, right? Which I think all of us, whether it's Kun or Serene or Patty, we're all in the same industry together. I think the readiness to adopt digital solutions are probably at its highest right now because of the pandemic. So for example, Oliver Wyman and Mercer, they did a survey, and 97% actually said that they're willing to try some form of digital health innovation, which before the pandemic would probably not be the case. So I think this is honestly a very good time for all of us here on this panel and in this summit.